Welcome to the New Life Stories channel. We hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. Albert lost his mom early. His dad was suffering a lot, but then there was his mom's longtime friend. Her name was Nicole. She lived very far away and moved to our town after she divorced her husband. She had a very positive effect on my dad. The sadness left his face, and after a while they got married. Albert was 5 years old, so he always realized that he was not Nicole's own child. He didn't like her at first, too young, too bright. She contrasted strongly with her dry and stern, elderly father. But strangely enough, they seemed like a classic couple. He is a wealthy far from the first man in his young life. She a young seeker of tight purses. Of course, Albert didn't understand such things at the time, but something felt right even at that age. However, Nicole later, it turned out that she herself could not have children at once diligently and demonstratively, began to pretend to be a good mother, the designated heir of the child, and it must be admitted she was quite good at it. The stepson was thrown into a whirlpool, school, lessons, extra English, swimming, hockey. His father wanted him to meet the highest standards, and it was the stepmother's responsibility to look after the heir. His father himself returned very late, constantly traveling on business trips, and Albert almost never saw him. As a result, in a few years, Albert and Nicole became very close. From frivolous, unpretentious, narcissistic, naughty girl suddenly turned out to be attentive and understanding nanny. There were only two things he didn't like about his stepmother. If some person caused her antipathy, she could do to him cruel and even mean. And secondly, if she had something in her pretty head, even her overbearing husband could not change her mind. In other respects, however, there was harmony and understanding between stepmother and stepson. And when Albert grew up, he suddenly discovered that next to him is not only a caring mentor, but also a charming woman. So when the turn of adolescent maturation came, the first thing that presented itself was a stepmother, and the special piquancy of virtual possession of a luxurious body was given by the fact that from the overheard conversation between parents, once it was clear that the bed between them has long been gone, and for extraneous connections, Nicole had no opportunity. Except for shaping and shopping, she devoted all her time to her stepson and house keeping, and to her husband on the left of her principal, banquets going out and the like. And it should happen celebrating his 18th birthday at a hockey game. Albert broke one arm and earned a serious sprain of the other. Basically, everything could have been handled by himself. Everything, except the water treatments. And Nicole, wrinkling her nose one day, had stated flatly that the baby needed a shower, and she would do it. It was terribly embarrassing to appear like that in front of his stepmother, but there was no way out, and he himself could hardly bear the lack of introductory procedures. In the bathroom, Albert couldn't contain his hormones. The stepmother was not confused, finished the job well, and not only, and Albert fell out of reality for a few moments from embarrassment and shock. Then you go, little one, I hope you sleep well now. The corners of her lips lifted with a barely elusive chuckle. Albert's face flushed crimson, but his stepmother acted as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. For half a month, this washing was repeated every other day. All as after a fortnight, the bandage was removed from one arm, and the pleasantries ceased. Everything went back to friendly relations, a good stepmother, and an obedient stepson, and Albert was left to fantasize. A year later, an even more extraordinary incident occurred. Nicole wasn't much of a drinker, but once a year, she met up with her high school friends and Bob, their driver, brought her back, as they said, with a good drink. This time, it happened that Albert's first girlfriend lived near the restaurant, and he asked her to pick him up at the same time. After he'd kissed and even fondled her a little, it didn't go any further than that. Bob tactfully lifted the soundproof, tinted partition so that the drunken stepmother fell into the cabin, and no one saw how she clung to her stepson, wrapping her arm around his neck, throwing her leg over his knee and pressing herself into his shoulder. "Baby, you're so good." Nicole said drunkenly. I want to do something nice for you. Do you want to cancel art class or boxing? Albert was dumbfounded at first, trying to tear his stepmother away from him. At first, a sense of incongruity flashed. He in a t-shirt and shorts. She in a black with sparkle stylish open short dress, and then it became uncomfortable from the fact that a grown woman, which she dreamed of so much, pressed against him, from her light kiss on his neck, from the tantalizing smell of fine perfume, and then that very uncomfortable suddenly transformed abruptly into wild desire. Oh, I know how to thank my baby for being so good, drunkenly shrieked stepmother and reached into Albert's lower abdomen. After that, Nicole fell safely asleep with her nose tucked into her stepson's lap. I had to drag Nicole, who was barely moving her legs, into the bedroom, pulling Bob away from her. Fortunately, she and her father had separate bedrooms, so no one noticed her soiled face. The next day, Albert, who had been up half the night plotting out the details of a difficult conversation, was surprised to find that Nicole didn't remember the details of last night. She had been alert as usual, solicitous and asking what was wrong with the overcast toddler. But not even a movement of her eyelashes showed that her memory held any egregious moment. And then came his 19th birthday, which fell on a Sunday this year. Albert, at the hour of 11 o'clock, came leisurely down to the drawing room and stood astonished. A woman in tattered jeans and a greasy sports sweatshirt was kneeling in front of his stepmother, who was sitting on the sofa in a luxurious, mottled robe. She gave the impression of being unkempt, both by her clothes and her not-so-clean hair, though the crying face that turned toward him was generally pretty. Meet little one, this is my half-sister. Do you have any kindred feelings for her? Megan, for that was her name, as soon as she realized that this young gentleman, a plump tall youth, was her nephew, stopped crying, opened her eyes wide, and, opening her doll-like mouth in mute exclamation, jerked to jump up. The cold look of her nephew, however, prevented this impulse, and it was impossible not to admit that she had once been, if not beautifully classic, very sweet. Now, Mom. Albert kissed his stepmother defiantly on the cheek and settled down on the armrest next to her. Well, you're all grown up now, so it's up to you to decide. Your aunt asked to see you sometimes, but I'll tell you a little bit about what we found out here. Megan had a baby at 16 with no remorse, putting it in an orphanage because her lover refused to marry her. Then she was married twice, though she never had any more kids. Last year she started drinking, got a job as a waitress in a roadside cafe, and even a few times went up to her room with visitors, after work for money, of course. After a night with the owner, she was kicked out by his wife. For the sake of objectivity, it may be noted that 5 years ago she began a search for her son, but so far they have been unsuccessful and very mentally drained for her. She now thinks that you are very much like her son and wants to live with us and find temporary solace and comfort here. Besides, she assures me that she has stopped drinking and is looking for a decent job. So our sorrow. Yes, she whispered, her eyes wide as she gazed at her nephew groomed from another life. I propose to take her as a maid, said the stepmother. Why do we need a maid? The cleaning company cleans every day and cooks and serves. St. Albert. Well, for example, you will be tumbling around with her in the bedroom. If you don't have any feelings of kinship in quotation marks, Nicole said ironically, so the stepmother came out with something that the stepson didn't like in her very much, to humiliate, to hit a person causing native emotions. It's time for you to go. For your health? Megan shrank back, lowering her head, but didn't object. She had to be so low, too. Listen to such humiliating comments, and even more so to acquiesce to a proposal that contradicted all the canons of reality. Albert felt something fluttering in his lower abdomen. If it weren't for the dismal appearance, he would surely have lifted the girl off his lap, maybe even hugged her. Let her be indifferently. He turned away and curiously wrapped the neckline of his stepmother's robe. But I don't want to sleep with her. It's not nice. Nicole was literally pushing her steps in to do what she had said on her birthday. Her stepsister was dressed in a maid outfit, probably purchased at a specialty store, a black dress with a square neckline with a short hemline, trimmed with white lace from under which the edge of a stocking showed, a black and white lace beret around her neck, the same cuffs of Barrett in her blonde hair, and a doll's apron. And it must be admitted that washed, calmed with light makeup, she made a completely different impression from the first meeting. Her slender figure, her fresh face drew the eye, making Albert slightly regret the decision not to sleep with this 32-year-old attractive woman, still otherwise. In all honesty, Megan was on her best behavior. She was quiet, obliging, and inconspicuous. If that applies to a beautiful woman in a not-so-decent outfit, she didn't make friends, didn't try to push her rights, demand attention, or make heartfelt conversations. And this doomed submissiveness completely confused Albert. He knew for sure that if ordered to go to bed with him, she would do it without hesitation. She would be absolutely obedient under his unrestricted power. Vacation at the Institute came, and he and his stepmother went on a tourist trip to New York. It was the last day of their stay in the city, and there were no excursions planned, just to walk around the city. The weather was sunny in the morning, and Nicole was as dazzling as ever. A short light skirt, a loose white, almost transparent blouse. Albert, who was driven crazy by the uncertainty with his aunt mixed with his feelings for his stepmother. Already in the middle of the walk, he felt very thirsty, and then suddenly the rain came to his rescue to cool his heated body parts. They were just a little away from the center, from the crowds of tourists. In addition, the rain dispersed the others, but some river was available, as well as the descent to the water. Albert dragged his stepmother down to granite steps, pressed her back against the stone facing of the embankment, and pounced on her, covering her with kisses. "Baby, what are you?" The stepmother was clearly taken aback by her stepson's behavior. Her eyes rounded in amazement. "What are you doing? Stop doing that." However, the boy was no longer thinking anything, the woman's voice trembling. Okay, kid, calm down. Let's not hear. The rain has already stopped. Let's go back to the room." But her stepson was no longer listening to her. "Baby, please, there are going to be people in the streets now." "Oh wait, let's better go back to the hotel." "Baby, what was that?" the stepmother asked after ordering her steps in to turn away and pulling a pack of tissues and a pad out of her purse. There was no anger in her voice, no severity, just a slight reproachfulness. Albert didn't answer, staring at the lead-in water flowing leisurely past a centuries-old granite slope that had probably seen worse. He didn't answer, didn't emphasize the fact that his stepmother clearly liked it herself. "Kid, let's make a deal that we forget this incident forever and never resume such a relationship again. Okay?" After arriving from the trip, Albert realized that just fantasizing under the blanket didn't suit him anymore. Too vivid and emotional impressions from a live woman, from warm, tender lips, and two beautiful women at his side. It is simply unbearable to see slender legs either in a robe or under white lace. It is hard to hold back heavy breathing, choosing with all his being the sight of these two nymphs. It was a particularly depraved temptation to have a submissive ready for anything mistress, and said Mother Nicole added oil to the fire sometimes, as if inadvertently wondering in front of his aunt, of course, when he would finally use her. And even in private, she persuaded him, seriously convincing him that there was no shame in it. I get it. She got it into her head that her stepson should sleep with her stepsister. And now it's an idea she can't get out of her. And Albert shook off his shame and remorse. He was lying on his side, leaning on his elbow when Megan entered the bedroom. She lowered her long lashes and said softly, "Did you call Albert? You didn't specify in your message what you wanted." Albert gritted his teeth and clapped his free hand beside him and blurted out as if throwing himself into a maelstrom, "Lie down here." Megan lowered her head, still not raising her eyes. She blushed but began to obey somewhat fussily, getting rid of unnecessary things. Finally, she settled down next to him, and Albert, pulling back the blanket, immediately snuggled in, leaning in for a kiss. Megan responded to the kiss unhesitatingly. "Are you ready to continue?" she asked. What followed merged into a cycle of pleasure. Megan was docile, obedient, and compliant, though she had the strategic initiative. "Now wait, I'll be right back," she said, slamming the door in the middle of the most interesting part. 10 minutes later, there were already two beauties, embracing each other, standing in the doorway. Albert's jaw immediately dropped in surprise. "We've been waiting for you to mature for so long. And now this moment has come. Relax and enjoy yourself, little one," the stepmother said. And both women headed for the bed. Dear friends, thank you very much for watching. Leave comments, put likes, share with friends, and subscribe to the channel.